Hello, listeners. Jordan here. I just want to let you know that you can listen to Nighttime early and ad-free on Amazon Music. Include it with Prime.
You are listening to the Nighttime Podcast.
Hello, listeners. For those of you out there with an interest in the otherworldly and the unexplained, I got something fun for you tonight. Regular listeners of the show will be familiar with my friend and regular guest Chris Rutkowski, a fella known to many simply as the Canadian UFO guy. For 40-ish years, Manitoba's most interesting man has been involved in nearly every aspect of the UFO conversation that flows across Canada. He's contributed near infinite TV appearances, hosted public lectures, wrote countless books and research-type papers, but in my humble opinion, his greatest contribution to the UFO discourse is the Canadian UFO Survey. If you're unfamiliar, since 1989, Chris and his collaborators have been compiling data associated with Canadian UFO sightings and releasing said data and their analysis of it in an annual report. Each year, the Canadian UFO Survey looks at the number of cases, when, where, and by whom they are witnessed, what colors are most common, what shape is most common, and a whole bunch of other data points. For people interested in the UFO topic, this report is appointment reading. And as it turns out, the 2023 version was just released. If you missed your appointment to read it, don't worry. Chris has agreed to come on the show and talk us through the survey and its findings. So put on your tinfoil hat, polish up your mood rings, and let's get into it.
R7062, go ahead.
Yeah, is there any active military airspace just like north of Winnipeg?
Nothing I'm aware of. You said north of Winnipeg?
Yeah. Lots of active bright lights, information, 3, and they look like they're at like 500 or something, just trying to figure it out.
Okay. Okay, thanks for that. I'll just make a note, but yeah, I can't think of what that might be.
Okay.
Mr. Chris Rutkowski, the Canadian UFO Survey for 2023 is out, and that means you're probably a busy guy and in quite high demand right now. So give me a sense, what's going on in the world? You dropped this report. What are people, what kind of calls are you getting?
Well, I'm getting a few media calls here and there, and but of course I'll make time for you. This is what counts. You and your viewers this is the real source of information on ufology. Nighttime podcast.
You're darn right. And I hear a lot of it. I get reports often. I hear from listeners often who are asking about you or sharing, UFO news with me, because it seems like over the last 5 years, really, it's just continued to build up the mainstream media's attention to this topic. And Canada's, as we've talked about on past episodes of the show, is finally catching up with the rest of the world. And we now have an official government UFO study, I guess, in the works.
Kind of, yeah.
Where's that at now? What's the news with this? It's the Sky Canada project, right?
The news is I have heard from them recently, and they are working on a report that will be ready in the fall. And it's not a study of UFOs as such. It's kind of a working document to try and understand what has been done in Canada, what is being done in Canada at various government levels and agencies, and what should be done in the Canadian government. So it's not quite a UFO study, but it's something.
Okay. I think a lot of their questions could probably be answered tonight, because as far as what's being done and what is happening with UFOs in Canada, that's you. And that's been you for the last 30-something years.
Yeah. One of the questions that they had was, how many UFO reports are seen? Well, we do know. 570 cases reported in Canada officially. That made it into the Canadian UFO Survey for 2023.
Yeah, so a lot of longtime listeners of Nighttime will be familiar with your work and with the UFO Survey, but for new listeners who aren't, why don't you introduce yourself? I call you Dr. Rutkowski, but you're not a doctor.
No, I have master's degrees. How's that? No doctoral degree. No, I've been at ufology for some time. I started in the 1970s. That's why I look so old. And I started trying to understand what UFOs, have been doing in Canada. How many were in Manitoba versus Saskatchewan versus Prince Edward Island versus BC, and what were those characteristics? So in 1989, I'd worked with colleagues across the country and various groups, and published a study of what was happening with regard to UFOs, and which ones were blue and which ones were green, and what time of day was most common. And we did it in 1989. It was received so well that we kept on doing it. And so 2023 was the 34th year that we had been producing a study about UFOs in Canada. And we've amassed something like 24,000 reports since
Wow.
1989, which is more than Blue Book, which is more than any UFO organization for that matter. And it's very significant that, that we've
Mhm.
had those many cases in Canada.
Mhm. And the report and the research you do and the data you compile, you're releasing it by way of an annual survey that's free for the public to view. And what you're doing is compiling all of the reports that are made across Canada of UFO sightings, and you're looking for trends, statistics, you're breaking down and examining the numbers. And now that you've been doing it for 30 plus years, you're able to look at, this year being 2023's most recent data, and you can compare that with prior years and really give Canadians a sense of what is going on. I think every year that passes, the report is more valuable and more interesting to go through.
Well, yeah, thanks for that plug. Yeah, it is. Um, and it's true. Like the idea is to find out how things are changing. Have things changed over the past 34 years? And we do. It's something as basic as, what months have the most UFO reports, and what dates are most common. Were there a bunch of clusters around? For example, 2023, there was a lot in February of 2023, a lot of UFO reports reported in Canada. Well, that coincided with the Chinese spy balloon fiascos and all that sort of
Mhm.
stuff. So people were reporting anything and everything up in the sky because they were looking up because it was a sort of national security. So we're going to take a gander up in the air and see what's there. At the same time, we've got Starlink launches and everything like that. So there's a lot going on. But we did have a peak in February, which was a little more unusual. We usually don't get peaks in the winter like that in Canada.
We're going to be talking about the 2023 version of the report that you just released, I think about a week ago. The report, as we've said, compiles UFO reports and sightings and data associated with them. Before we get into the report, for someone who's new to this topic and they may hear UFO and think we're talking about alien spaceships, may not necessarily be the case. What is a UFO report in terms of the UFO survey? Like, what data are you compiling and from where? Like, what is this?
That may seem to be a simple question, but it's actually quite complex. Um, a UFO, the original term UFO came from the United States Air Force. They wanted to move away from the term flying saucer because that had loaded baggage that it meant aliens somehow. So they said, let's come
Mhm.
up with this sort of clinical term, unidentified flying object. Unfortunately, over the years, that term has come to mean aliens for most people. So recently, there was a push to change it to UAP, which was unidentified aerial phenomena, then unidentified anomalous phenomena. Now, you call a spade a spade. It's something. If you see something in the sky that you don't understand, it's a UFO or a UAP or whatever. I mean, there had been some various terminologies that are sort of overlapped over the years, but those are the two basic ones. In Canada, though, Transport Canada has a classification of reports for pilots to file if they've seen something in the sky they can't explain. And they actually spell it out, unidentified flying object, UFO. So in Canada, we're still calling them UFOs. And we started the Canadian UFO Survey in 1989 when it was UFO. We're going to stick with it.
Well, I like it. And the data that makes its way into the survey comes from a variety of sources. You get data from Transport Canada, share some with you. Of course, I share any sightings that are reported to me. You collect them from social media like Facebook or whatnot. Where are you getting the majority of your data? If you had to think of the main two or three places.
Well, certainly the majority of data come from the general public, but also from the National UFO Reporting Center, which is based in the United States. From Quebec, there's a number of UFO groups in Quebec, including Association de Québécoise de Ufologie, AQU.
Ooh,
Um,
good.
they do really well. They're very prominent. They, are in the media quite a bit in Quebec, and they have a really easy to navigate website, and we get hundreds of cases through them. We do get things from, as you mentioned, Transport Canada, although not so much anymore. They seem to have pulled back on filing things. So, we get them from both official sources, civilian sources, and from the general public as well. That people want their cases to be known.
Well, we've been through a lot. We can now dive into the latest report. I've only skimmed it, so I'm excited to go through the data with you tonight. So let's start with, I guess, the big question people are going to want to know is the total number. So you said it at the beginning, but this year, how many UFO sightings were you able to collect? And maybe talk a bit about the number, how it compares to prior numbers, what the total number is telling you. Where are
Sure.
we at with this?
This year, there were 570 that we collected from all our sources. And that's actually a little bit down from previous years by a significant amount because not all organizations chose to participate this year. In fact, we asked for the data, and we didn't get it. So what we did, and I work with Jeff Dittman, who's my stats guy, and he helps run the website. And what we did, we pulled out um, all the cases from organizations that have participated all the way through, like National UFO Reporting Center, like AQU, like yourself, Nighttime Podcast has been going Facebook and so forth for some time, and UFOlogy Research. It turns out that the number of UFO reports in Canada has been holding steady. And what I mean is neither up nor down. And that may sound a little bit unusual to people because some people are saying, no, the reporting is way up. There's a tremendous interest in UFOs right now, which is true. The interest is way up, but people aren't reporting their UFOs as often, and certainly not reporting them to one particular UFO organization or another. We're really in a fractured state of ufology right now. And as far as we can tell, when we look at the various organizations, some are a little bit up, some are a little bit down, but overall, the meta analysis for you stats people is that the number of UFOs is remaining fairly constant. And 570 is nothing to sneeze at. We're talking almost two a day from coast to coast to coast somewhere in Canada. And from previous studies, we know that it's not just one person who sees a UFO. Usually there's a couple of people who are standing or sitting next to each other who see something. So we're looking at somewhere around 1,000 Canadians have seen UFOs and reported them in 2023 alone. And I think that's fairly significant.
Let's get into a bit more of the nitty gritty of the report. So not only do you look at the total number of sightings, of course, but you start to break down the trends within the different aspects of the study or of the sighting. So you're looking at things like all the data associated with the report, like the month, how many witnesses, what province, what time of day, the shape,
You bet it.
the color, how long was it there? Let's go through some of that stuff. One piece I always like looking at, and I don't know why this does it for me, is simply what month had the highest number of sightings. When I look at the report this year, I see that it appears that August is in the lead with the month of February right behind it, which I guess you kind of mentioned this earlier, but I would have thought the summer months would have been clearly far above the others as a result of more people being out at night in the summer. But February is the anomaly there, being the second most popular month for UFO sightings in 2023. What do you
Yeah,
make of this?
yeah, it's not intuitive. In fact, we puzzled over that as well. And yes, we mentioned February because of the that's when there's a lot of public interest in the Chinese spy balloons and the other objects that were shot down as well. That was in February. We actually had pilots in Canada who had observed the balloon or something like it in January as well. In fact, we have a report from the previous year, from 2022, of what seems to have been another or the same spy balloon as well. But February is in a bit of an anomaly. August seems to be the peak, and that's been fairly constant over a number of years now, which is strange, as you say, because you would think that it should be in the middle of summer, June, July, something like that. And
Mhm.
we've always had the peak shifted a bit into August, which is, we're not entirely sure why. That is very puzzling. But overall, about 50 sightings are reported each month in Canada in 2023. And,
Interesting.
there's a lot of cases out there.
The next kind of data point you're breaking down in the report in the survey this year, I think kind of goes back to my prior question about like what exactly is a UFO report, or like what happened that led to these being reported to you, which is a breakdown of cases by type. So what is this like? What are you comparing or breaking down in type?
Well, yeah, there are a number of types, in the classifications of UFOs based on their appearance. So there are things called nocturnal lights, and these classifications go back to a scheme that was proposed by Joseph Allen Hynek, who founded the Center for UFO Studies, very famous astronomer, sort of the grandfather of ufology, I suppose, is what people have been calling him. And he proposed these classifications. Nocturnal lights are lights in the sky. Um, Daylight discs are objects seen during the day. Created the third category, nocturnal discs, where people didn't see lights necessarily in the sky. They saw, a cigar shape or something with structure in the night sky. And then there are all these close encounters of the first kind, second kind, third kind, um, where the first kind is seeing something at close range. Second kind is where there's some physical effects that are reported, and the
Okay.
third kind is actually seeing the creatures. And those are the original ones. We've added a little bit of refinement, but those are the different types of reports that are we're using. And nocturnal lights
That's
are the vast majority, something like 45% of the cases. So most people are
yeah.
seeing simply lights in the sky.
Yeah, 250 of the reports in 2023 were simply nocturnal lights. Although the close encounters, the fun ones, there are a few of those. So you are getting reports that involve up close, in your face encounters with flying objects, as well as at least some reports of seeing some type of beings.
Very,
But pretty
very,
rare, right?
very, very few of them, but they're there. A few of them are there every year.
Let's break down province. People across Canada are going to be listening to this, but which province is sending in your reports? I think you kind of spoiled this earlier with bragging about how prolific Quebec is on reporting data.
Well,
It's them this year?
generally the provinces with the larger populations also tend to have the most UFO reports. And this is the tree falling in the forest phenomenon, where if there's more
Mhm.
people around that could potentially see something if something was in the sky, that's where you get most of the reports. That's generally true. So over the years, if you look at the whole body of data, it's like BC, Ontario, and Quebec. However, every year there's some odd little trends, and 2023 was quite remarkable in that um, Quebec had the most number of UFOs reported, and that was quite significant. It shouldn't have been, based on population alone. And then the Maritimes
Look at Nova Scotia. Are we in third?
Yeah, you guys are doing pretty good. Um, and whether that, there's certainly going to be a media effect. I mean, you guys are doing a great job. Certainly the fact that Nova Scotia also has the Shag Harbor Conference, and that, you know, people notice that. There's actually two conferences in Nova Scotia this coming fall. So, there's certainly an effect like that. And then there's some very active people. I know that David Ross in Prince Edward Island is very, very active, getting some media attention, but also getting the public aware that he's around and wants to hear about the UFO organizations, hear about the UFO reports. So, there's that kind of effect. Whereas in Western Canada, things are a little bit quieter. There is no UFO organization, for example, in all of Saskatchewan. So the number of UFO cases is going to be fairly low. In Manitoba, where I am here, we're down to like 3% of the total number of UFO reports, which is lower, much lower than we usually are. So yes, there does seem to be some odd little blips here, and some of it can be explained and some of it can't.
I'm always interested in color and shape. For me, I guess nocturnal light is going to be the most, like a single point of nocturnal light seems to be the most common report I see. Typically, and now without thinking of the data, what I see most often is I saw a white light in the sky.
Yeah.
Does that match the report? Is that what?
Yeah, that's usually what we get.
Charge?
And sometimes what are reported in terms of simple nocturnal lights is people say they've seen orbs. And the problem I have with orbs is that became part of UFO parlance over the past 10 years or so. It really came into prominence. They were used a little bit before then, but an orb means a spherical thing. But people have this idea that it's, about this big or so. And when people report seeing a light in the sky, it's not necessarily spherical. In fact, many aircraft lights are not spherical. We often get the Starlink satellites described as being orbs, when in fact the Starlink satellites are not spherical at all. They're actually shaped like refrigerators. So, so calling them orbs is kind of pretty wrong. But there's no question that the images we see our retinas pick up are simple lights, points of light in the sky because they're so far away.
Looking at the report, I see 46% of the 2023 sightings were white. 3% gray. Oh, a gray light.
Well, no, see, that's during the day, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Because this is both daytime and nighttime.
Mm-hmm. Of all of the data points that you break down in the report, what did anything stand out as uniquely 2023 or telling in any way?
Well, certainly
Any surprises?
the provincial breakdown was some of the most significant, and the months. Those two we've already mentioned those. 6%, I think, this year were what we called, we eventually termed unexplained. That doesn't necessarily mean, those were the ones that were alien spaceships. It just simply means that those are the ones that seem to have enough information that, we could probably rule out aircraft, stars, and planets, and that type of thing, and planes. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, because maybe with more information, if it's more investigated, the site is visited, that type of thing. Maybe we'd get more information and eventually be able to explain it or come up with better ideas.
Yeah, what you're discussing here is the section of the report where you break down the reports by conclusion. So each of these reports can either be considered having a probable explanation, being explained, having insufficient evidence to create an explanation, or unexplained. So when I look at this year's report, 47% of the reports have a probable explanation. 10 of them have been, you believe, are explainable. 37% have insufficient evidence, and 6% are unexplained, which would imply that there's enough information included for you to come up with that decision. I think that's a big deal if 6% of these, you know enough to say you can't explain it.
Yeah, and in fact, we're doing better in general at explaining cases over the years. Um, Although last year, 2023, as you mentioned, 7% had seemed to have definite explanations. In 2022, 15% had definite explanations, and I think the difference is that a lot more cases are coming in with not enough information to really come up with a good idea of what was seen. I think insufficient information was like you say, 37% or so, compared with 30 the year before. And so that affects the number of unexplained cases as well. Um, but and most people, and this is a very important thing, most people think that there's two categories, that something's either explained or not explained. That would be true if we had enough information. But the insufficient cases are the cases where somebody couldn't remember what date it was, or the actual location where the sighting occurred was not provided, or they didn't actually provide. If they sent information and it was incomplete, they didn't reply to follow up. So those are the types of things that are insufficient. Probable cases are the types of case where if a person was watching what seemed to be a stationary light, or maybe one that's jiggling around in the sky for 4 hours over the course of an evening as it slowly descended towards the ground in the west. Those are probable stars or planets, but in some cases we can't identify exactly what direction was looked at, which planet it was, that type of thing, or if they lived near an airport. And what they saw perhaps in the sky was a high flying light, could it have been a high flying aircraft, and so forth. So those are the probable cases. We can't definitely assign an explanation. And that is actually very significant with regard to some of the American reports that are being discussed now, the ones in Congress, where the all domain Anomaly Resolution Office, this AARO, they said at one point that they had, X number of reports, and only one had a definite explanation. So people said, well, all the other ones, were unexplained. Well, that's not what they said. They said one we were absolutely able to identify as a deflating balloon. The others, we couldn't figure out which aircraft or which satellite or which balloon or which star. That means that they were unexplained, but it doesn't mean the same thing.
Interesting. You end the report with a collection of kind of text versions of sightings or reports that were submitted. Do you want to maybe pick one from that stood out to you as memorable from this year's and read through it, if you have it handy?
Sure. One of the most interesting ones came from Transport Canada, where a pilot on March the 2nd, so around this time last year, 11 o'clock in the morning, and the report in Transport Canada simply stated an unidentified object was reported by a pilot on the ground standing south of Highway 401 between runways 33L and 33R at Pearson Airport. The object was approximately 1,000 feet above ground level, heading in a northeast to southwest direction. The object was roughly 10 to 20 feet in diameter, sphere-shaped, and either white or light gray. So this is a pilot not in his plane. He's walking on the grounds of Pearson Airport, looks up 11 o'clock in the morning, sees this spherical object that he calculated to be 10 to 20 feet in diameter, just sort of motoring along from northeast to southwest.
The hell is it? What could that be?
I don't know, but it's strange that it's like over Toronto Airport. So, I mean, something that came to mind, obviously, maybe it's a weather balloon or something like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, the assumption is that pilots see weather balloons all the time. That he would be able to say that this was a weather balloon of some sort. Also, 10 to 20 feet in diameter, moving over the airport would have been detected by the airport. the air traffic control would have had something like that on radar. And
Certainly. Unless I'm crazy, the idea of a weather balloon 1,000 feet above the ground, above a major airport, would be a really bad idea.
bad idea, and would have caused a lot of concern. And now the trouble is, when these things are reported to Transport Canada, and every day there are hundreds, or at least 100 reports filed by Transport Canada and made available, and some of these do have some UFO contact. Um, uh, but we don't have the investigation. We don't know what happened. We don't know who the pilot was. We don't know what was done with this report. We do know that he or she reported it to Transport Canada, or reported it rather to the Air Traffic Control Center, and that the shift manager at Air Traffic Control passed it along to Transport Canada, to NAV Canada, which is a civilian non-government organization, who then puts it on the Transport Canada website. There's all this, a lot of people involved in this, and we can't even file for information for this because NAV Canada is a non-government organization. You can't actually get an access to information request to them. So we don't have enough information, and yet there's a lot of information there. So this was
Yeah,
an
geez.
unidentified and unexplained case because there's enough information to rule out a number of things, but we need more. So this is a
Mm.
great example of a case that's unexplained, and yet there's a lot of unanswered questions.
Yeah, man, you'd want that data, and this they would have taken this seriously because as I'm reading it, the pilot, just as you said, he reported it to like the shift manager of the Toronto area control center. So this would have I'm certain this would have been like at least an all hands on deck situation for a few moments as they were trying to figure out what's above Pearson Airport as planes are coming
Yeah,
and
yeah.
going.
What the heck did you guys see?
Yeah, geez, that's upsetting. It's upsetting that you don't have the rest of the report because this was, I'm sure, was taken seriously.
It absolutely was. Absolutely.
I got one for you.
Okay.
This UFO report would have made it into your Canadian UFO survey, but the witness actually shared a voice memo with us. His name is Roland. He's from Regina, Saskatchewan, and he's sharing a UFO sighting he had. So I'm going to play Roland's report, and then let's see if we can solve this tonight.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Roland. I live in Regina, Saskatchewan. My wife and I, at 9 p.m. on Saturday, August the 12th, we observed a bright greenish bluish light in the sky for about 10 minutes. It rose very rapidly and stopped. And then I took the binoculars and looked at it, and it had elongated shape, dark, and then all of a sudden it moved north extremely fast, quite impressive. And both of us we both looked at it. We're sky watchers, we're plane watchers, we're bird watchers. This was approximately 5,000 to 8,000 feet high, and very, very spectacular the way it moved north in a straight line. It was something we've never seen before. And then we went to the front of the house to see if we could see it again, and it was gone. I am sure other people saw it. Anyway, I thought I'd let you know this. Like I said, it lasted for about 10 minutes, and it was very fascinating. But it certainly wasn't a balloon. It certainly wasn't an airplane. It was unidentified. Unbelievable. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
August 12th, Regina, Saskatchewan. 10 minutes he sees this with his wife. First of all, before you give me an idea of what you think this could have been, does that date mean anything? Like, would you have any data that shows other reports on on August 12th? Or
Well, I just been going through our the database, and I did find it. Um, yeah, and seen at 9 o'clock, Regina, nocturnal light, green in color, point source.
okay,
And I had it down as an insufficient information. And I think, I mean, we certainly got a lot more information in that audio. And I'm just looking here. August the 12th, there were one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine other reports from across Canada, but only that one from Saskatchewan.
okay,
There was a report from Minden, Ontario. An object on the horizon looked like a circular disc. There was one, two, three reports from Prince Edward Island. There you guys go. The Maritimes getting more cases. Three reports from Prince Edward Island that same night. From Cove Head and McNeil's Mills, a person had seen a number of orbs that seemed to go to the same place in the sky. But in Owen Sound that same night, 10 o'clock at night, three lights in a triangular formation moving slowly across the sky.
interesting. Well, already what I'm getting from this though is that August 12th of 2023 was a very busy night for UFOs.
Yeah, as a
Because
matter of
if
fact,
we have,
we have,
five or six sightings, that's well above what would be
yeah,
expected.
nine actually. So that's quite significant.
There you go. So getting back to his report, do you have any idea what this could be? Like in his explanation, it rises suddenly and moves quickly,
Well,
sticks around for a long time. Like when I hear these reports, my first thing to think of is it Starlink or like a satellite slowly moving through the sky? That doesn't sound to be what he's describing.
well, I mean, believe it or not, this could have been an airplane. And the reasoning is that we don't often see things moving across our field of view. Sometimes we see things at an angle. Sometimes they're moving directly away from us. And when an aircraft is coming towards us or moving away from us, we'll see the light kind of sort of move up or down, but we won't see the lateral movements at all. And that will take some time before it, eventually moves further and further away. And then it'll bank or something like that and take off. And since this was reported from Regina, it's a major airport. It's a possibility. And that would explain the 10-minute duration. A little bit longer than that, obviously, half an hour, 45 minutes to an hour, we'd be talking in terms of stars and planets. Shorter than that, we'd be talking in terms of satellites. But 10 minutes seems to be something that could be consistent with an airplane. I'm not saying that's what it is, but if I had to
Hmm,
give an explanation, that's one I would say.
interesting. I did enjoy his report, though. It's obviously
Oh, yeah.
an important night and a memorable night for him. You could hear in his voice he was excited to share that. And
Mhm.
I removed personal information. He went on like, "Here's my phone number. Like, I'll talk to you about this." So this guy saw something memorable, and I think that is what I hear from a lot of people who share UFO reports with me is that yeah, maybe it was just a light in the sky I couldn't explain, but it's a night I'll never forget.
Yeah, and in fact, seeing a UFO is quite a profound experience. It shakes your worldview. Just imagine if you didn't believe any of this nonsense and this UFO stuff. It's all garbage, and you see something, and it really will rock your world.
Um, all right. Well, Chris, this has been fascinating. The report I look forward to every year. I look forward to breaking it down with you every year. And I thank you again for giving some time to me and the listeners of the show.
Absolutely, and it's thank you for promoting this because there's not a lot of scientific studies of UAP and UFOs, and this is one way we're trying to get the data so that science can better understand what's really going on. It's not just simply I saw a light in the sky last night. We want to know dates, times, locations, color, shape. As much information as you can get. If everybody who saw a UFO provided the information that fellow in Regina provided, we'd be
Mhm.
way, way ahead. We just don't get enough information.
we'll let that be a call out to the listeners. If you have a UFO sighting to report, if you see something you can't explain, there's many ways you can report it. But if you go to nighttimepodcast.com, I have a tool on my website where you can both send a text version of the report, which goes through me to Chris and into the report, into his UFO survey. And you can also send a voice recording, just like the gentleman from Regina did. And we'd love to hear it.
Absolutely. That's one of the best ways to get the data to us.
Hell yeah. All right. Well, thanks again, Chris. And we'll have you back on the show soon.
Okay. Thank you.
I want to thank you for joining Chris Rutkowski and I for this discussion. For those of you interested in a deeper dive, I've added a link to his report in this episode's description. It's truly a fascinating read. Now, with that said, I'm going to start wrapping things up here, but before we go, let me give some thanks. First, a big thanks to Chris for sharing another evening with me and with you, the listeners of Nighttime. A shout out to Monty, Datta, who provides the music for the show, and LJ from the Dystopian Simulation podcast, who provides our intro and outro voiceovers. And then lastly, but most importantly, a massive thank you goes out to each and every one of you listening to Nighttime, as without your interest and your support, this show would be as pointless as it would be impossible. On the topic of support, let me thank the newest subscribers to the premium feed. Melissa, Lauren, and Ryan, thank you for your support. And for anyone else who'd like to support the show, you can help us out here in a variety of ways. First of all, a premium feed subscription costs just a couple dollars a month, and that money funds the creation of the show. But it also gives you the episodes 2 days early, gives them to you ad-free, and gives you access to a full back catalog of episodes. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, you can go premium right now at patreon.com/nighttimepodcast. And even if you don't want to go premium, you can still support the show and its growth by simply sharing this episode on social media and letting all your like-minded friends know what we're doing here. If anyone listening has any story ideas, wants to give feedback on the show, or would like to submit a question or comment to be aired and responded to in an upcoming episode, you can do all that and more at nighttimepodcast.com/contact. I look forward to hearing from you. But until then, take care of each other, hug your loved ones tight, and let me know if you see anything weird.
The Nighttime Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Jordan Bonaparte.